Okay, welcome everybody. I'm Joanna Cohen. I'm director of the Institute for Global Tobacco Control here at the School of Public Health. And I want to welcome you all to our Innovations in Tobacco Control seminar series. I am so pleased to be able to introduce our speaker for today, who has come all the way from Nigeria, Dr. Oladepo. He is currently a professor in the Department of Health Education and Promotion in the Faculty of Public Health, but he has been Dean of the Faculty of Public Health, and he has been what they call the head or the chair of the department as well. And I wanted to note that he has a lot of research interests, and he's done work on adolescent smoking behaviors, but I think one of his very notable accomplishments is that as dean, he instituted a smoke-free policy at the university in all lecture halls and offices. And that was back quite a while ago. So you were really on the avant-garde. So that's terrific. So he's, as I've mentioned, he also has many other research interests. He's worked on child survival, adolescent reproductive health issues, HIV/AIDS, the prevention and treatment of tropical diseases and health systems as well. And he has received a lot of distinguished funding for his work, including from the World Health Organization, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Institut Pasteur, and many others. And also, I think of note, or what I want to say is he has received a visiting scientist fellowship from the World Health Organization in the 80s and studied at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. He's also received the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation Leadership Fund Award in the 90s, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Visiting Scholar Fellowship that brought him here to the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health and the Department of Population, Family, and Reproductive Health at the time, and he was here in the 2000s, around 10 years ago. He's also a fellow of the African Population Health Research Center. So, and you know, there's much more for me to read, but I'm told that we've got a full presentation, so I don't want to take any of his time. So please join me in giving Dr. Oladepo a very warm welcome.
Thank you very much. I bring you warm welcome and greetings from the University of Ibadan, as well as from my research group, the Tobacco Research Group at that university. Today we'll be talking about tobacco control and legislation in Nigeria, and we'll be examining some of the within decades, intrigues and outcomes of those particular intrigues within the purview of policy formulation and policy implementation. What we are seeing just represents what happens in Nigeria in respect of tobacco farming and the process of fermentation, prior to getting into the industries. And of course, you will notice from that particular slide the issue of involvement of minors in tobacco farming, in tobacco processing, thereby depriving them the educational opportunity to complete their schooling on time, absenteeism in the schools when they are supposed to be there, among others. So what I'll be talking about actually is a strand of the big study we conducted on analysis of non-communicable diseases prevention policy in Africa, and especially in Nigeria. This was funded by IDRC, Canada, in collaboration with the African Population Research Center in Kenya, over a period of 3 years. And the stimulus for our study was the observation that we do not have information, especially on a system policies in Nigeria on non-communicable diseases, especially the risk factors, including tobacco use, harmful tobacco consumption, unhealthy diet, and physical inactivity. And we are interested in knowing the extent to which in Nigeria, policies are formulated and they are done within the context of global framework. For example, part of the global framework for tobacco control, among others, has to do with the involvement of many sectors in policy formulation, which is termed multi-sectoral approach to policy formulation. The other side of it has to do with the integration of what the WHO calls the best buy interventions, which are strategies that are cheap, are feasible, are cost-effective, are culturally relevant, and that, if implemented, can actually make a difference and add value to life. So within that context, we looked at policy formulation in respect to NCD risk factors, as well as the level of integration of the best buys. Talking about tobacco in Nigeria, we know that Africa is an emerging market for tobacco products, and Nigeria, being the most populous country in Africa, also is an evolving lucrative market for tobacco. For some of us who are not very familiar with Africa, that's Nigeria, somewhere along the line up there, around the equator. And Nigeria is divided into 6 geopolitical zones: southwest, south-south, southeast, north-central, northwest, and northeast. And within those geopolitical zones, we have 2 major zones that are responsible for tobacco farming. One of them is the southwest, comprising states like Oyo, Osun, and Kwara states, while in the northwest, you have Sokoto. That does not mean that tobacco farming is not practiced in other states, but this is where you have the majority of tobacco farmers planting tobacco. And let me give you an illustrated example that in each of the states that comprises of what we call the local government areas, other people call it councils or districts in other countries. An example of a population of 359,000 people, you have 10,000 people from that population currently directly involved in tobacco growing operations. And in that small, tiny area, they produced 2,088 tons of tobacco in 2004, and by 2013, it has already risen to 2,500 tons. And looking at this picture, you will see this young girl whose educational opportunities have been cut short because she has to labor in the farm to tilt the ground, harvest the leaves, process the leaves, among others. Well, one other thing that we noticed has to do with tobacco statistics. Very difficult to come back in Nigeria, and I'm not surprised. If you Google, you are going to find nearly nothing. But you may also find out that the tobacco industries have already employed some third parties to combine statistics, and then you can be asked to come and buy that information for as much as $587. They knew what they are doing because nobody is going to put $587 to buy one little book containing statistics. But what we knew is that the land devoted to tobacco growing is increasing. For example, 21,000 hectares of land was cultivated for tobacco in 1970, and this rose to 22,000 hectares in 2000. These are some of the samples of tobacco products in Nigerian market, and a lot of them were imported. You'll find names like London, Standard, Yes, Henry Moore, and so on and so forth, that have displaced the local ones that have been produced, like Gallon, among others. And you also find out that most of the cigarettes have just one label, Federal Ministry of Health warns that smokers die young. And that's all that is put in there. And you can see the proportion of the front and back packages in which this information is on. Now, let's look at the burden of tobacco use in Nigeria by looking at the smoking prevalence, which is 5.6% national, with a preponderance of males at 10%, versus the females smoking in Nigeria. You will also notice that smoking is much more in the southeast and the north-central parts of the country, followed by the northeast. So that is distribution. What this means is that, yes, more males are smoking, but the smoking prevalence is also higher in some states than the other. If you look at what is also happening within the country, the smoking prevalence has actually been going down since 1980, but the main consumption per smoker is rising very rapidly. And I say, why? Many times I speculated and said, oh, there was recession, there's a lot of stress, so people smoke more. There's a lot of smoking experimentation going on, and therefore, that may actually exacerbate the problem. Smoking experimentation is on the increase, and from a study conducted in 2012, it was found out that Nigerian children aged 13 to 15 years have initiated smoking experimentation, ranging between 3.6% to 16.2%, depending on the states in which we are talking about. Well, more problem is about exposure to secondhand smoke, and especially in restaurants, in workplaces, as well as in government buildings, which actually should have been protected. So people do smoke in government buildings despite all the paper regulations about smoking. So it's a problem. And we know that the effect of secondhand smoke is even more lethal than the primary one taken from smoking. In looking at part of the strength of our work, because like I said, we actually examine the type of policies, tobacco policies that have been legislated in Nigeria over time, including the non-legislative ones. And we found out that there are 8 types of policies on tobacco control and prevention. And 2 of them actually are legislative, and as I go on, we'll talk about that. The event leading to the tobacco control policies in Nigeria is uneventful. It started as early as 1951, when I was not even born. Under the Section 6 of the Nigeria Order in Council, which has to do with revenue allocation. And the policy content was actually on the issue of licensing and controlling tobacco importation. Moving from that, in 1990, when we have the military in governance, they promulgated a decree, which is called Decree 20, because they are in the army, they do theirs by decree, not through democratic dispensations and participation. So, in terms of content, that policy bans smoking in specific public places and also require warning messages on every tobacco advertisement and sponsorship. So in 1990, after the military left power and the democratic governance was in place, then that decree needed to be changed into an act. And that's why you have Tobacco Control Act of 1990. It is this same Decree 20, but now it has to go through the legislative process. And then in 2009, the National Tobacco Control Bill was put on in Nigeria. And the content regulates and controls production, manufacturing, selling, advertising, promoting, and sponsorship of tobacco and tobacco products. This particular bill of 2009 was later passed on in 2011, but the president refused to assent it at that time. And in 2014, you have what is called the Standard for Tobacco and Tobacco Products Specification for Cigarettes, which actually has to deal with some specifications in respect to packaging of cigarettes, including health warnings, and the provision of flavoring substances with potential to initiate or appeal to children, which we should also talk about. Not done, in 2013, the Nigeria National Policy and Strategic Plan of Action on Non-Communicable Diseases, which encompasses tobacco use, which encompasses the use of alcohol, as well as unhealthy diet and physical inactivity, were compiled into that particular one document. And that policy, in respect to content, relates to the issue of protecting people from tobacco smoke in public places and workplaces, also talking about danger signs of tobacco, as well as enforcement on bans on advertising and promotion, including raising of taxes and the prices of cigarettes and other products. And this went on till 1915, when the National Tobacco Control Act of 2015 was put on and was legislated. And actually, the National Tobacco Control Act of 2015 was the Tobacco Control Bill of 2009, which was modified to include other content, such as establishing Tobacco Control Committee and Tobacco Control Unit, tobacco control funding, and the prohibition of smoking in public places, tobacco emissions disclosure, packaging, education, communication, pricing, and tax measures. So, all in all, the 2015 National Tobacco Control passed through the real legislative process. I will say also that the Nigeria National Policy and Strategic Plan of Action on Communicable Diseases is the overarching policy document that has all the FCTC components in it. That's the overarching one. And then it also embraces all the other risk factor areas that I've mentioned. In talking about policy formulation, you also need to look at the context in which that particular policy was formulated. And like I said earlier, the multi-sectoral action is so much important as part of the global strategy for ensuring that policies that are made encompass a large variety of stakeholders to have a voice in coming with that particular policy. If you look at all the 8 policies that I've talked about, it's only the National Tobacco Control Act of 2015 that has the issue of multi-sectorality well embedded in it. If you look at the various types of sectors that are involved in them, like education, health, agri, justice, finance, transportation, trade, including professional associations, as well as law enforcement. Similarly, within the National Policy of 2013 and Strategic Plan of Action on Non-Communicable Diseases that was later finalized in 2015, we also have a situation where more sectors were involved in the formulation. So the overall summary of it is that it's only 2 policy documents that you have a letter of multi-sectorality in them. All the others are very low. As part of my discussion earlier, I did mention about the issue of WHO recommended best buys interventions and the Nigeria tobacco policy status. it is expected, according to WHO, that the best buys must have the issue of taxation, it must have the issue of smoke-free policies, it must also have the issue of health warnings on tobacco products and advertising ban on tobacco products. But if you look at those particular policies, it is only the 2015 tobacco control policy, as well as the overarching policy of strategic plan, that actually embraced the best buy interventions as have been recommended by the WHO. But what are some of the areas that were neglected in terms of gaps? One is the issue of smokeless tobacco. It's not there. Ban on corporate social responsibility of the tobacco industries. It's not there. Giving gift to lawmakers and law enforcement agencies was not part of it. And the law against tobacco use and alphas is there, but there was no law against production of tobacco. So tobacco can be produced. We are dealing with the end part of the stream, rather than go back to where the source of the stream is, and that's the production section. No law banning about you cannot plant tobacco, you cannot do this about tobacco, but they are talking about don't smoke tobacco when it's already produced, which is a big problem within the policy framework that we did. Where we are all familiar with the marketing ploys of the tobacco industries worldwide. It's not different in Nigeria, but I'm going to specify what the tobacco industries do in Nigeria in respect to decades of marketing. Yeah, of course, the production line is always very active, as you can see, and the big boss is there, and the tobacco producer is, on the other hand, sitting down there, and the leaves are turning up all the tobacco products. One of the ploys majorly embarked upon has to do with cross-border smuggling, and it is estimated that 20% of the total product consumed in Nigeria, they are smuggled cigarettes. And who is behind that? The tobacco industries. A UNOC 2009 report suggested that the smuggled cigarettes in Nigeria accounted for about $774 million in terms of value. Second, they also disguise cigarettes by concealing them among other products and falsifying documents on the source of the stock. You can see the customs actually stopping a vehicle carrying all sorts of stationeries and co. But among that, you can see the packets of tobacco that are neatly wrapped and put in between those particular stocks. And what you see on the stock paper, they are all stationaries. And we can see that they are all stationaries indeed, in the reverse. Not only that, they do infiltrate the government, and especially our legislators and bureaucrats in government. And they do that purposely for the purpose of reducing taxation on the products. In 2003, the amount of non-processed tobacco from China that was brought in Nigeria, taxation was reduced from 15 to 5%, while the finished products was also reduced from 80 to 50%. And don't ask me why. It's something that goes underneath that is responsible. Second, they make donations to government, such as customs, as we soon find about. And they also corrupt public officials, especially at the porous borders. Also, there's also the sale of fake cigarettes, which they brought in. And more importantly, is the aspect of luring farmers through what they call the corporate social responsibility programs of the tobacco industries, as we shall soon find out. So that's a problem. Now, the fourth strand is that they flavor cigarettes. And this is becoming very worrisome in Nigeria. Young people, I can tell you from what I saw in Lagos, in Port Harcourt, in Abuja, in Kano, and Kaduna, it's horrendous. You go to any of the clubs, it's a new outfit. And you can see young people priding themselves in smoking what is called shisha. And for them, it's a status symbol that they have arrived. They are no longer smoking your small one-stick cigarettes. They are doing what they call the next level generation of cigarettes. And it's only the very rich kids, the kids that have arrived, that can do this. And it's becoming very popular. But it's worrisome in terms of the health consequences for these young people in the future. And when you have a toxic combination of cigarette, the shisha, and the alcohol, that even compounds the problem. And that's what is happening to young people. And interestingly, in my institution, in the University College Hospital in Ibadan, we are beginning to see strong, very interesting cases of young people suffering from all sorts of cardiovascular problems, diabetes, cancers, and so on and so forth. In fact, 2 of them who were bankers just late last year collapsed and died, and they were taken for pathological examination, and of course, the pathologists were telling us about some of the problems with NCDs for these young people. They do interfere with the media, and how do they do that? Many times they influence debates in the media so that they can influence decision makers by ensuring that they stir up controversies about the advantage of cigarettes in terms of contributing to economic development. That is their style. They will tell us about employment of young people, employment of adults, going to contribute to socio-economic development of the nation. But on the reverse, they are not telling us about the consequences that it is for the population in terms of mobility and modality. Again, they also organize third-party political groups, including retail sellers and local farmers, to make a case for them so that the pressure is coming from different places. And of course, the pressure on policy actors is very high, so as to frustrate the policy implementation action plans. Finally, they target school children, and that's more worrisome. A study has just been concluded in Nigeria now, where they found out that a lot of the schools, in terms of their billboards, were actually designed by the tobacco industry. Second, they ensure that within the vicinity, 100 meters of that particular school, any convenience store in that area, they will go to them and give them cigarettes to sell to students at lower prices in order to initiate smoking experimentation. So that's also that. People who are pushing on cars around the school are also infiltrated, like I said. And for young ones, I'm talking of the young adults in the universities as well as polytechnics, they know how to get them. They organize carnivals for them. They organize roadshows for them where they actually stimulated competitive smoking, and they are going to win prizes and incentives, including traveling to somewhere on the pocket of the tobacco industry. Now, we are coming to the core of the matter. We are now talking about what type of intrigues have been used between the government itself, the tobacco support groups, as well as the anti-tobacco support people or organizations, and what has been the outcome in the last 3 decades. And we are going to examine this within a 5-year period of a decade, and we can see what happens. This illustrates what goes on within the government and the tobacco company and the anti-tobacco groups. It's a long pull and a strong pull. And you can see that the tobacco industry is actually having a stronger pull, pulling both the government and the anti-tobacco groups as much as they could. So within 1979 and 1985, there was an attempt to introduce tobacco control policies with the government establishing a national anti-smoking campaign and also releasing a communique approving submission of tobacco control bill to the National Assembly. Beyond that, they submitted a private member bill, which is called the Cigarette Smoking Injury Bill, to the National Assembly. and also established the Interministerial Committee for the Control of Smoking in Nigeria. WHO also supported the government in this particular direction, which is good. But what did the tobacco industry do? Aggressive marketing of the cigarettes. They established their own International Committee on Smoking Issues, which they later renamed as International Tobacco Information Center. They created the Manufacturers Association as part of their constituency building, and also formed the Tobacco Advisory Council of Nigeria. Beyond that, they ensured that they influence politically by connecting very big people, we call them big people, to lobby members of the National Assembly who are the legislators, as well as those who are just about to converse to come to the National Assembly as legislators. So in other words, they hire lobbyists to influence policies. What then happened at the end of 1985, the cigarette smoking injury bill, which was presented to the National Assembly, was defeated through the long and very short pull of the tobacco industry. So the attempt of the Nigerian government to legislate tobacco control failed woefully. And between 1990 and 1995, the military government announced the creation of Decree 20, of which I talked about earlier. And they also set up a workshop where they said that workshop should recommend the following: more prominent health warning, prohibiting tobacco promotions at events, hospitality industry and co., and the issue of public campaigns on the hazard of smoking and promoting intersectoral collaboration in line with the FCTC. The tobacco lobbying, anti-tobacco lobbying group also advocated for the enforcement of these existing laws, and even sent Professor Femi Pierce, who is a leading tobacco control advocate, to the workshop. Now, at the same time and period, the tobacco industry went into very aggressive lobbying, using all forms of tactics. First and foremost, with their collaborators in Britain and in America, they were keeping close watch on the government, on any move they wanted to use as far as the announcement of Decree 20 is concerned. So they liaised with lobbyists and formed task forces, and even condemned the setting up of the workshop, as well as sending their own position paper to the workshop, saying that each of those particular areas of focus, they disagree with it, and finally rejected the workshop recommendations. Again, they used the Farmers Association, Council of Nigeria as front groups to oppose the tobacco control measures being built up by the government, and also mounted what is known as fake news. First and foremost, they talked about smokers were being arrested by law enforcement agents for smoking in public places, and that cigarette retailers were having their stock confiscated, which was not actually true at that period. Again, what was the outcome of it? Passage of a weaker Decree 20 in 1990. So between 2002 and 2007, Nigeria ratified the FCTC, which further energized the tobacco legislation. And the Minister of Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, came out with the Abuja Smoke-Free Policy, which is very, very good and comprehensive for other states to be able to emulate. And the civil society organizations also strongly supported the government in respect to this signing of the FCTC framework. Now, the tobacco industries, what did they do? They gave Ford range trucks. I think Ford is produced in America. Yes? Okay. Gave a lot of Ford Ranger trucks to the Nigerian Customs Service and pumped $300 million into local economy. And the government said, yes, no problem. It's part of your social responsibility. Can you believe that? So, but despite all the intrigues at that particular period of time of 5 years, the Advertising, Promotion, and Promotion Control of Nigeria, APCON, achieved objective through the total ban on tobacco advertisement as part of the outcome. Moreover, between 2008 and 2012, there was a bill that was sponsored by Dr. Olorunimbe Mamora of Lagos East. It's called the Path for the National Tobacco Control Bill of 2009, which went through public hearing in July 2009. But interestingly, and this part of where the intrigue is, the legislators were split on whether or not to support that particular bill. And for example, you have Senate President David Mark making the following remark. He's the leader of the legislation, and he said, and I quote, "We are torn between economy and the health of Nigerians in passing this bill, but we're not compromised because it's only those who are alive that can talk about economy." It's a lie. See the reverse side is saying, "I will remain neutral on this bill because the two key issues are health versus economy." Further information that we have is that President Olusegun Obasanjo, during that time, was also not unsupportive of the fact that this particular bill will not work. All right? So, anti-tobacco groups, especially the Environmental Rights Action Friends of Nigeria, the Nigeria Tobacco Control Alliance, and Against Coalition Against Tobacco, were very, very instrumental in supporting the government on this particular bill. But tactical diplomacy by the tobacco lobby industries prevented the 2000 bill from advancing to the committee stage, because that was supposed to happen in terms of legislative process. You draw up a bill, it has to go through the legislative committees for discussion before they can know whether to continue processing it. But they infiltrated the legislature and made sure that it never happens. So what did we have? The state-of-the-art maturing hub for entire West African region in Ibadan was established because the government, as we found out later, also did something about it. It was introduced. And the bill we are talking about passed through both the houses of Senate and Assembly, but the president failed to assent to it. And you will think, why is the president failing to assent to this anti-tobacco bill? Then, there was a bill to amend the National Tobacco Control Act of 2015, and FM championed the development and passage of this bill. But just before that, let me just make one issue clear in terms of the MOU that was signed here during the 2008 and 2012, because a memorandum of understanding was signed by the government with the tobacco industries, asking them to establish a regional center for tobacco export in Nigeria. And eventually, this 150 million infrastructure was established in Ibadan, where I come from. If you are coming to Ibadan from Lagos, it has the end of the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. And according to the government at that time, that is going to inject money into the economy through employment and all sorts of other honey-like information that the government produces to convince the people to accept them. Now, this state of the art, like I said, was there, and it's still there till today. But what is happening there, from what I gathered before I even left Nigeria, was that somebody who was close was talking about ill health, even among the people who are working in that particular industry. But the tobacco industry is just what closing and making sure that they do not come to the public. Okay, I was talking about the amendment of the National Tobacco Control Act of 2015. Here, the Minister of Health actually championed the development and passage of the Executive Bill of National Tobacco Act of 2015. And they did that through the inauguration of the National Tobacco Control Committee, which comprises of people from various sectors. And the anti-tobacco lobbying group also supported the signing of the executive bill. They agitated openly, published position papers in newsprints, especially by the Nigerian Medical Association, that was calling the president to please attend to the bill. Now, the tobacco industry recommended, because they said they have a stake in that particular policy, that the legislature should delete certain parts of that policy. Those include the aspect of National Tobacco Control Committee, the tobacco control funding, regulation of smoking and sale to minors, as well as regulation of public smoking, penalties for owners and non-compliance. They said they should delete it from the policy if they wanted them to support that policy. They also planted moles in government and received unauthorized documents through these moles. In fact, before any bill, when it's still in the draft form with the legislators, the tobacco industries have already had it. They did it with the Decree 20. They had it 3 months before the military could even bring it up to the table. And that's part of it. In addition, they requested that the implementation of that act must be effected on NAFDAC, which is the agency regulating drugs and control in Nigeria. And who was saying that? An honorable of the Federal House of Representatives called Honorable Dixon Taggy actually did that. You could see what we are talking about in terms of the intrigues of the government. So some of them are already bought. And other things that they did include an advertorial in a newspaper on the 6th of October 2016, questioning the integrity of the National Committee set up on tobacco control. They said they are being sponsored by agents of international donor agencies and NGOs because they are the ones giving them money, which actually the Minister of Health repudiated and said that he had confidence on the members of NATO. Apart from that, BAT provided 280 million naira interest-free loans to tobacco farmers in Nigeria, and also provided and contributed $719,000 of corporate social investment in 2010 in the communities where they operate. So you could see what is actually happening there. So eventually, regardless of all the intrigues that happened between the government in terms of its own insincerity, because most government legislators have been bought, and through the power of the anti-tobacco lobbying group, the National Tobacco Control Act of 2015 became law that conforms with the WHO FCTC. And from that time, there's no further action on the implementation of the Tobacco Act. What are some of the observations we noted on the National Tobacco Control Act? That bill itself has gaps. It fails to address the issue of smokeless tobacco, which has gone up in Nigeria. It fails to address the use of corporate social responsibility programs by the tobacco companies, which is also a big problem. The WHO in 2017 conducted a study to find out where is Nigeria on the implementation status in respect to all tobacco control. At least a summary of their findings. That yes, in respect to advertising, promotion, and sponsorship, this has been banned in domestic TV and radio. Internet sales of tobacco products have also been banned, including outdoor advertising. Also banned is the issue of brand stretching, toys resembling tobacco products, candy resembling tobacco products. Retail incentive programs have been banned, including paid advertisement on films and so on and so forth. But when it comes to the others, it's just some restrictions on them. And those restrictions are actually on paper in most cases. The issue of promotion by force of misleading or deceptive means, promotion of gifts in conjunction with product purchase, free distribution of tobacco products, the aspect of internet communications, as well as confessional moral offending and so on and so forth, are all partially restricted. When it comes to the extent to which that aligns with the FCTC, yes, it aligns in terms of tobacco sponsorship, advertising, promotion, and the tobacco product. But when it comes to issue of penalties, for example, yes, it talks about violation of advertising and promotion provisions and violation of sponsorship provisions. But I've not seen yet, any time, anywhere, that this has been enforced. And that's a problem. Where the issue of smoke free places is only in train, buses, and other shared ground transportation that this is enforced, especially taxis, aircrafts, watercraft, and so on and so forth. With all the others, educational institutions, health facilities, universities, bars, pubs, nightclubs, casinos, nothing is happening, I can tell you. Nothing is happening. Nobody is enforcing anything. It's only probably in the United States that we're going to be talking about all the rules and regulations. I remember when I was at UNC, we went to a party, and we got to the door, and they stopped me, and like, want to see your passport? And I said, what for? They said they wanted to know whether I was 18. I said, me, 18. I'm coming for a PhD. If you look at all the years that I've been reading, it's more than 18 years. Oh, then they said, okay, show us your passport ID. And they put a stamp on my hand. I said, what? But it's a good regulatory environment because it works. Nobody puts any stamp on anybody's hand in Nigeria. A 5-year-old boy or girl can be asked to go and buy and purchase cigarettes in Nigeria, and nothing will happen. So that's also a source of concern. Beyond that, you have the issue of penalties, like I've mentioned. There are duties and penalties that are being imposed on the issue of post signs, removing ashtrays, tests to require a person to stop smoking. All these, while they are good on paper, is not translating to what is happening in reality. The situation reality is that it's not happening, to the best of my knowledge. And the alignment with the FCTC also shows some alignment in terms of tobacco products and outside packaging and labeling. Okay, and that goes on into the issue of warnings in unit packaging and labeling. Yes, it's required. That one is required. Warning on outside packaging is required. But like I said earlier and what I showed you, the warnings are not big enough. They only cover about 50% of the spaces on the front and at the back, whereas it's supposed to cover everything. So that's a problem. Then some of the warnings, the warning only focuses on the issue of health impact. Young people will die when they smoke. It's not talking about advice on cessation. It's not talking about the addictive nature of tobacco. It's not talking about adverse consequences economically to the families and the communities in which cigarette smoking prevalence is high. It's not talking about, people can call this number if they wanted to quit smoking. Nobody's talking about that. And yet, they are talking about, yes, a scorecard of Nigeria. Like I said, it's on paper, and anybody can challenge me on that. So, I've already cited the issue of a smoke-free environment and said it's only on public transportation, and that bans on tobacco advertising is also on tobacco products with non-tobacco brand names and pay placement in media. Other ones are not there, like this has been shown. The same goes onto this in terms of summary. The issue of taxation is a problem in Nigeria. If you look at the total taxes, it's about 21%, and 220 is just like 220 naira. It's less than $1, and the total exercise is about 16%, and that's about 70 cents. Very, very low taxation, and unless you deal frontally with taxation, because it's one of those elements that, if implemented, can make a change to support the regulatory environment in which some of these policies are drawn. So what is the conclusion and way forward from our findings? One is that we know that the legislative process in Nigeria has been strongly influenced by the pull and push forces, but the tobacco industry is having the upper hand. They are disrupting policy formulation, destabilizing it. They are using their scalar money to do that. Second is that the lobbying tactics of the tobacco industry is just similar, like I said, to what happens in the world. And what the point they are trying to make is to ensure that they delay and erode against made of tobacco legislation. The implementation of the Nigerian 2015 Tobacco Act is in jeopardy, especially if this surge by the tobacco industries continue. I doubt if that one can be done, although the present minister, Professor Adewale, has vowed to use his position to ensure that the tobacco industry will be engaged in real free fight as far as he's concerned. And he's very committed to it. He's already set up the committee to start working on that. The fourth conclusion that we can draw is that the implementation of the new law regulating tobacco use, I will say, will remain elusive if there is no legislation to curb the excesses of the tobacco industry. Actually, they are floating the way they like, and you can understand. Because at one point, you are seeing the legislators, they can make all the noise that they wanted, but behind closed doors, something else is happening. And that's one reason they are talking from both sides of their cheek. In the public, during debate, they come up and so on and so forth. Supposing I'm a legislator, and my daughter is about to wed, what happens? They know how to get to me and say, okay, we cover the OnlyFans, we do whatever, and so on, so you don't worry. And so when I get to the house, what am I going to say? It's going to be supportive of them. So we actually needed a new regulatory framework to curb the excesses of tobacco industry, and that is not on the plate right now. The way forward, citizenship education, policymakers education, technocrats education about, first and foremost, the negative effects of tobacco. Second, for them to understand the tactics of the tobacco industry, especially on the corrosive effect on the legislative process, corrosive effect on the marketing of tobacco products. These are critical. And unless they understood that, then nothing will get done. Let me just use an illustrative example from the findings of our study on the AMPPA. When I went to Abuja, and I told the minister, I said, we're going to bring our resource to the front, but all the sectors in Abuja, finance, whatever, we want to ensure that they hear about the results that we had. And he said, oh, that's fine. Just go ahead. So we did that and pull all them together. And first and foremost, one person from the, sent by the senator said, so what have you got to do with that? We've already made our laws. So what have you got to do with the issue of the regulation is not working? And I said, if you make regulations and your regulations are not working, then you go back to the drawing board and ask, why is our regulation not working? And do something about it. I mean, folding your hands as if we've already regulated tobacco control is not enough. And then he said, oh, I see. Okay, maybe we do something about it. Because somebody from the Ministry of Finance said, actually from the Central Bank, and said, what has the Central Bank got to do with NCDs, tobacco control, and so on and so forth? And I said, you have more to do. Taxation, just tax and tax, increase to 70% of the total cost, and you will see what happens. Anybody who wants to drink 3 bottles of beer in Sheraton, in Abuja, you must be very rich, because a bottle is like how much is it now? About 3,000 naira. So you want to drink that, you're going to go about 9,000 naira, which is equivalent to how much now? At nearly 400 naira to the dollar. So you don't have that economic capacity to drink more beer there. You should have taken 3 or 4 bottles of beer with the same amount of money that you are going to use to buy 1 bottle in Sheraton, outside in the kiosk over there. So, but because of the increase in tax of those particular alcohol and co, including cigarette, then people are very effective. They don't want to go along and take more. And that's why I said regulation is important. Well, beyond that is that we felt that there must be strengthened mechanism to enforce strict compliance with all the components of the Tobacco Act, including the W2 FCTC recommendation. And that's the role of the government, that compliance is an issue. Nobody is complying. The tobacco industry are happy nobody is complying. The anti-tobacco lobbying groups are not doing enough to enforce compliance by taking people to the court, taking industries to court, and say, no, we can't have this, and then we see what happens. We also felt that the anti-tobacco champions need to be created for tobacco control at all levels, federal, state, and local government levels, highlighting the damage tobacco causes to public health, to the economy, and the environment. And if it's done across board with the issue of citizen education, that is likely to work. The World No Tobacco Day is usually an event in which probably people from the Ministry of Health, we just go to one community, make some noise for about 30 minutes, and then return back to their offices. I think it has to go beyond that. There must be innovative and diverse approaches or strategies that can stimulate the policy actors and the citizens to demand an end to tobacco industry ploys and games. And this can be done through non-violent protest, through using multimedia approaches, through using case studies of people who have, for example, tobacco-related cancer to come and tell their own story in front of the world. People will believe them better than me talking about, oh, tobacco is dangerous for your health. And lastly, government at all levels should also bring the tobacco companies flouting the laws to justice and sanction them appropriately. But in cases in which judges can be corrupted, as you have seen in some of the papers and so, that creates a problem. Because the way the tobacco industries go underground to actually influence policy actors and even the justice system is something that worries me a lot. But the fact is that we must not give up. All of us must do something to ensure that we work together to deal with this big problem. And I also suggested that beyond what each country is doing, we need to come together globally and fight this menace. And it's very important that we do that, because when you are fighting as a researcher in Nigeria, you are fighting alone. If not because of the minister, we should have even got to the place where we are when it comes to the issue of tobacco control so far. And so, with this, we said, make every day World No Tobacco Day. It's not just one day for No Tobacco Day. It should be every day, and with all of us working together to cease smoking. Let me end by thanking profusely this beautiful lady sitting down here. I'm talking about no other person than Professor Jan Cohen, the director of the Institute for Global Control, whom I'm seeing physically, face-to-face for the first time. The connection between us was made possible by my teacher, who is sitting down here, Professor Braiger, of the health systems, who has worked with us for many years, and even got chieftaincy title as a result of his work on Guinea worm control. He taught me to copy, and I think I didn't disappoint him. So I'm thanking Professor Cohen for showing this global leadership. She's an icon. I want to thank you for your kindness and for giving me the opportunity to be here to share some of our own findings in respect of this work. As a matter of fact, by the end of this month and March, we will be having a BMC supplement, which contains a lot of the manuscripts that came out of our work, both in Nigeria and 5 other countries. In addition, you also be availing yourself of the opportunity to read our entire report, which will also be placed on the website. I think we should be looking for that. So thank you once again, Joanna. You are strong. Rekia Richardson, I don't know how to thank her. She's not here. I learned she has some flu infection, which is being dealt with. I will say, without missing words, She's a good professional, arranging all the logistics. Rekia is somebody that send an email now requesting for information. By the time you finish typing and sending, the response is already on your something. I just laughed. I said, this lady, is it only my work that she's doing? With all the logistics years within the Johns Hopkins University. She's an excellent professional and a good administrator. For all the OMA members of the Institute for Global Control, all my friends who are sitting down here, I think I want to thank you very much for your support, because without your supporting Joanna, I shouldn't have been here. Professor Braga, again, I've already thanked you, and I'm really thanking you for making the connection. This connection actually led to us writing a proposal for Fogarty grant, and I knew that we were penciled down when they were asking us, how many grants are you now running? And they said, this does not mean that we are writing you the final letter of admission and so. But we were shocked to hear that political intrusion actually kicked out the final funding of that. But we remain resilient. We are not going to stop. We are going to go ahead, look for other funders who believe in the global push to push tobacco out. We are not going to relent, and I've already told Professor Joanna that. And looking at the crowd, I could see my friend, Professor David Peters, the director of the Future Health Systems of Nigeria, Future Health System Consortium, Global One, of which I was a member. We worked together on the project of improving the health systems globally, together for a number of years. But before that, I knew him when he was the World Bank, when the World Bank, through the Japanese grant, wanted to give Nigeria $200 million to infuse into the HIV/AIDS prevention program. But it was a game of musical chairs. Immediately they learned about that. What happened? Dr. Tiligado, who was the director of HIV/AIDS, was asked to, we are sending you to Britain for capacity building. It's just to ensure that she leaves that seat and somebody else takes over the seat and takes over the money. And that's the minister. And so the presidency heard about it and said, Minister, this is in the presidency. And within that period of arguing forth and back and running to meet the president at home, the deadline given by his group at the World Bank expired 1 minute past midnight on that December 31. And so Nigeria lost $200 million of free money. And that also explains why we have problems of HIV/AIDS not being exceeded at that time. For the staff and the interns and the tobacco control group in my department, I want to thank them very much for their contributions to this particular presentation. And once more, for all of us who are here, I say thank you for taking time to be here. I'm so grateful. Thank you. God bless you.
Just a quick thank you. I mean, that was a fantastic, comprehensive overview of tobacco use and tobacco control policy in Nigeria, and I really appreciate you sharing all your insights and expertise with us. Dr. Oladepo will be here for a few minutes if you have questions, but I think we're going to have to formally end the program now. But please come up if you have any questions, and please join me once again in thanking him for a fantastic presentation. Thank you.